It's my privilege this morning to introduce Felicia Mitchell, who's been with our church several years. It's not the first time she's spoken. She is an author. She's written many, many poems, beautiful poems. I do own one of her books and have enjoyed it tremendously. When I found out she was going to be speaking today, I did bring the book out and reread it once again. I've read it several times. So I know we will enjoy her talk today, and I've looked forward to it for several weeks. So, Felicia, I'll leave it all up to you.
I get nervous around people. So this is a preface. It's not in my speech. I need my glasses for that, but not for this memory. So I think I was probably the original child to have a play date in the 20th century because, I grew up in the 50s, and somewhere around 1959 or 60, Daddy said to Mama, I think Felicia needs a friend, and arranged a play date with a little girl on the street to go to a movie. No, I had 3 brothers. I was not alone, but I was spending most of my time under an azalea bush playing with frogs and caterpillars at that point, and I've always been I just feel very comfortable in the company of creatures, and thinking about our principles, the inherent worth and dignity for me would be of every creature, so human, etc. So today, here I'll put on my glasses and talk, and wave at me if you can't hear me. I think you probably can. I want to. There are a lot of things that we can think about when we think about our relationships with non-humans, and I could probably talk for days, but what I want to focus on is what we can learn about ourselves, perhaps by thinking about our relationships, and especially what we say to critters, and what we learn, which is not to be, egotistical or anything. We learn about animals too when we talk to them, but today, since we spend a lot of time being philosophical here, I thought we'd think about ourselves. Do you see I'm apologizing for not focusing on the animals so much? Anyway, so I'm going to offer some reflections, and I have timed it so that you'll have time to talk. And so as I talk, I hope that you think of and perhaps even jot down things you've said, or just things that come to mind, or whatever. And if there's someone here who's never spoken to, say, a moth or a stink bug, well, that would be interesting too. So I'm going to begin with a poem that I wrote just the other day in honor of today, and I'm not sure where it'll end up, but in terms of my writing of it, but this is where it is today, and it's called After the First Frost, a Phoebe Calls. He is not supposed to be there in that tree, but there he is, calling to me as if I will answer, and I do answer. You're right, Phoebe, I say to him out loud in the parking lot. You're right. It is almost noon, and the sun is high in the sky, and I'm wearing a sweater that is orange and black and look nothing like a bird or a bird watcher, yet know enough to know that the Phoebe is right. Months from now, spring will come and more Phoebes, and the air will be redolent of their calls to one another. Mornings in spring, I lie in my bed and listen to them. I walk into the yard with my coffee and listen to them. I pause wherever I am when I hear them. They are always in their own world inside my own world, and I do not always speak to them, though I do sometimes, as I do now, this first morning after the first frost, looking up into the tree in front of me as if I can go there too. And so I should say I was at work in the parking lot doesn't really matter. Sometimes I talk like if I'm on a trail and there's no people, and then people do show up, and that's always interesting. So anyway, so what's important for today is what I said to the Phoebe. I think you're right. Why is the Phoebe right? Y'all know the Phoebe? You could Google it very quickly. I should have brought my phone and played the sound, but it says Phoebe pretty much. But more often in spring, rarely, when I heard it, was maybe sidetracked during migration or something. Inside the poem, if you hear only the poem, you think that the Phoebe is standing in maybe for some wise figure. The poem doesn't tell us what the Phoebe is saying, so we can decide, is the Phoebe being used here, maybe as some literary device, perhaps, or is the Phoebe just a Phoebe chirping? It's like a mating call at the wrong time of year. There may be a message that I read into the Phoebe. Then there may be what the Phoebe said apart from my tendency to insert human stuff into the landscape of my journeys. Or is it something else? In Greek mythology, the goddess Artemis, and we would call her Diana in Roman mythology, was often called Phoebe as a kind of pet name or nickname. The goddess of chastity, virginity, the hunt, the moon, and the natural environment. Artemis may seem invoked a little in my poem, perhaps because it's difficult not to write about a Phoebe in a tree without thinking about the pool of the moon, the solitude represented by chastity, the lessons of the natural environment. Some New Agey resources say that the Phoebe calls to mind balancing of the heart. Of course, Cornell's ornithology website, which is a great resource, says that a Phoebe is simply a tyrant flycatcher. Its calls common in summer and spring. So, sometimes a Phoebe is just a Phoebe, but because we're human, it's never just a Phoebe. That's the way it works. Now, hearing the Phoebe after a frost the other day reminded me of obviously the way seasons cycle, and of how the Phoebe, which I associate with the giddiness of early summer when all is lush, and I maybe am happiest, the opposite of chaste, not when I am, but when the summer is, can remind me that frost is transitory. But let's get back to what I said. You're right. Of course, the Phoebe is always right. So it is sort of odd for me to say that out loud to a Phoebe. About what could it be wrong, to think about it. Birds are never wrong. It is a poem. You can pick whatever you want to think the Phoebe is right about. For me, I think that I was walking out of a budget meeting from a darker hall into the light, from a room into a parking lot by which there was a tree, from a room full of people talking, into a place where only birds called. I did mention I'm very comfortable in the company of birds and creatures. I think that I was reminding myself that worries are just worries in terms of the context. No matter what happens inside the walls of a building, outside some bird will sing and bring me back to what I want to see as my best reality. The natural world grounds me and reminds me to come back down to earth or try to go up to that tree. From where my human tendencies can take me. So it's no coincidence that St. Francis of Assisi is the patron saint of both animals and the environment. And I want to read a little bit from his Canticle of the Creatures. And it's like a prayer. Praise be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Sir Brother Sun, who brings the day, and through whom you give us light. And he is beautiful and radiant with great splendor, and bears a likeness of you, Most High One. Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars. In heaven you formed them clear and precious and beautiful. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Wind and through the air, cloudy and serene, and every kind of weather, through which you give sustenance to your creatures. Praise be you, my Lord, Sister Water, which is very useful and humble and precious and chaste. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us and who produces varied fruits with colored flowers and herbs. St. Francis really sounds like a pantheist so much of the time. So here St. Francis makes a little distinction. We're all beautiful and radiant, part of one big natural plan, whether or not we see it through the lens of the atheist, pantheist, or whatever. Sister Mother Earth and Sir Brother Sun, Brother Wind, and Sister Water, they sustain all creatures, humans, cats, caterpillars, deer, stink bugs, babies, etc. And yeah, Karen knows about my stink bug episode of the other day. Ask me about that later. My relationship with stink bugs is very interesting. So humans are different, though. For one thing, our language, are we different? I mean, that's an awful egotistical thing to say, but we are different, I'll admit. So, because I can. For one thing, our language allows us to talk about things that happened long ago or will happen in the future. It allows us to talk about things that are not real, to make things up, to write that poem, to provide an infinite number of sentences, along with new words that we coin almost every day. With all that, we have been able to do many things. We have tried to make sense of that which is difficult to pin down. Language, some of us think, gave birth to religion. Our imagination allowed us to invent a metaphorical world that includes the God to whom St. Francis addresses his prayer. For some, God is a word that signifies a creator. Others can see the divine not as a personal God, but as something else. God, a metaphorical word for a force that's either natural or divine or both, something more ineffable, infused in all living things, including trees and birds. Talking, if we think about that, we might think that talking to that Phoebe could be a little like talking to God. You know, you're right, Phoebe, you're right. Or you're right, universe, you're right, or whatever. So not all creatures I talk to end up in poems, but many have. You probably noticed rereading that collection. But sometimes I surprise even myself when I see a dialogue when there is none, or at least not a traditional one, where I am just talking, not just writing. True, often when we talk to creatures, we're really talking at them. Poor little spider, somebody might say, smashing it with a book. That wouldn't be me. So mostly I coexist with my spiders, and they like the stink bugs. But if they're like the poisonous kind, I'll take them outside. But mostly they're the daddy long legs. So anyway, not to get off on the spiders. So skunk heaven, I used to say when I smelled the odor of dead skunk while driving with my son. You know, when you have a small child, you learn about death, not just from pets, but from driving down the street. So much so that when I had to tell a 3-year-old guy that his Aunt Brownie had just died, we use the word died, he said, oh, did she get run over? or if the fish, when his fish died, the same thing, did the fish it was the fish, not Brownie, did the fish get run over? You know, he hopped out of his bowl. Anyway, so skunk heaven became our euphemism for that. And it was also to turn something that people might think of as an ugly thing into something okay. You know, I don't mind this. Well, not to get off on skunks. Anyway, hi there. How are you? Sometimes, some of us don't just talk at creatures, we talk to them. Crouching on the Appalachian Trail one time, talking to a millipede, I was just really in this intent talking. It wasn't talking back. But you kind of get into your own zone. And I was startled by a group of hikers. You know, they see you there completely alone talking. And so I said, I'm just talking to the millipede, smiling, perhaps a little embarrassed, but not really, because, you know, I think the trail is a place where I often sing, talk to animals, all the things you don't see me doing here around people. I'm out there, I can sing a really good song when there's nobody within 20 miles. So, or maybe, but probably there is across the ridge. Anyway, so it was easier, but I wasn't saying I was talking to myself. It's easier to say, I'm talking to that millipede, I'm talking to that Phoebe or that Junco or whatever. But I was talking to the millipede and to myself. I did not expect the millipede to talk back. I think I was just doing what humans do, using language to interact with the world. You know, who knows what the millipede hears or the sound waves or whatever. It doesn't understand my English. And the millipede itself was doing what millipedes do, walking across the path to get to where it needed to be. Truly, there are people who see a millipede or whatever and take great excitement from stomping on it. I've seen people blow up anthills with firecrackers, adopted a 1-pound kitten shot and left for dead in a trash bag on the side of the road, tried to tape an earthworm I myself hacked in two at the age of 10 while working in the yard, and I still feel bad about it. And I put antibiotic cream too. Anyway, so sometimes, but at the same time, I admire hunters with ethics. And I feel awful when I see game wasted, but I understand ethical hunting and stuff. So it's complex. When Temple Grandin says that animals make us human, what she really means is the choice to treat them fairly and ethically is ours, as if humans have this sort of ability to be ethical and fair. I think creatures can be too, but that's what she means. And we can exercise our human sense of right to ensure that animals are treated kindly, even as they are slaughtered. And if language makes us human, perhaps ethics will too. So, next part. For a few weeks in September, I kept a pad handy and wrote down pretty much everything that I said to Gabriel the kitty cat. I like to do research. So, and Gabriel the kitty cat's a feral cat that decided to live with me this past February, the day I buried my old cat, Charles the cat. And I stopped taking the notes when I became self-conscious of the process, and then just started categorizing. You know, once I started talking about Jean-Paul Sartre, for example, I knew it was time to stop talking to the cat because I was sort of, you know, priming the pump, so you'd think anyway, it was crazy. So later I looked at some very simple linguistic structures of what I said, just for fun, and I could talk about that with my students as well. So here are some insights. First, no one category of sentence structure really overshadowed another. I had equal number of sentences, questions, commands, cued exclamations. It wasn't, you would think with an animal in the house it might be mostly commands, do this, do that, but it wasn't that at all. We had long conversations. And he does meow back. So anyway, first, but I don't sit there waiting for it to happen. I tend, so here's some insights about that. I tend to use a few single words or phrases with the cat, unless these words or phrases are serving a larger purpose within an exclamation. So when I use a simple phrase, it's usually the name, as in Gabriel the kitty cat. I always give my animals long names. Or Gabriel, his name, kitten or baby. Sometimes when I use a single word or phrase, and I know he's not a baby, I know he's a cat, that substitutes for a whole sentence, as in milk, which is to say, look here, Gabriel, I have poured some milk for you. Second, I use more questions than you might expect when the creature is not necessarily going to speak back, except to meow, which I guess does count. But again, I was being sort of human-centered. I didn't write what Gabriel wrote back. In the beginning, I did. I was putting down what I said, and then I put like an asterisk if he didn't say anything. I just focused on me. So these were never rhetorical questions asked pretty much for the sake of asking. Each one really did demand an answer, and about 98% of the time, I knew the answer, which is okay, but the rest of the time I didn't, and so that's kind of more interesting. The questions I asked when I didn't know an answer, it's like talking to that Phoebe, just throwing something out. An example of a question, though, a curiosity, based in curiosity, might be, where did you go? Because I let him out a little bit with his little collar, with his artificial diamond and bell, and he jingles, and he comes when I call him because he's like a little puppy. And he loves, having been feral and cold and frozen, he's happy to stay inside mostly, but he also likes to go out. Anyway, so you never know where cats go when they go out. I could put like a little webcam, little phone cam or something, and mostly I know he's out by a chipmunk hole. And yeah, just sort of hoping the chipmunk will come out. But sometimes he disappears into the woods. Anyway, where do cats go when we let them go? What tales could they tell us? It could be interesting. You can read a cat's body language to know if it's encountered something scary. The cat's body language, like the fur is sticking up when it runs into the house. So third, commands were traditional. Usually, this is sort of interesting, where you drop the subject, like do this, do that, instead of you do this, you do that. Except in a few cases, I would add a you for emphasis, and that was interesting to me because you use a personal pronoun, and you can use it with a kitty cat, but more often than not, I found that in just a lot of just even sentences that weren't commands, I would drop the pronoun, probably because there's not a perfect pronoun for a cat. Maybe we need to invent a new one, the way we're doing for the whole continuum of gender. But we'll worry about that another day. So I might say, you come in, little fella, or you watch the house, emphasizing the you rather than do this, do that, which is, also a way of softening a command. When I added you, I was clearly distinguishing between cat and me, the you and I, or the exchange, which makes sense as many of the commands related to the negotiation of leaving the house or returning, either the cat or me or both. Come on, little kitten. You can all sort of roll your eyes. Come on. I tend to say come on more often than come in. I tend to say, you watch the house when I leave, Gabriel, as if this duty is some consolation for being left alone. I want him to feel purposeful, I guess. And I guess I should pause. I mean, most of you know I live alone and have lived alone a long time. And so I think people who live alone maybe have different relationships with their animals than they do, or maybe not. But I think when I lived with people, I still did this. I did, I promise. So don't take me as the good example of someone who lives alone and loves her cats. I think if I lived with 65 people, I'd be the same way. So anyway, I guess I want him to feel purposeful. I want him to feel purposeful. And then the other commands are the normal ones, but a lot of move. Move, go on out and stay. And like I said, he is a little bit like a puppy. He's very smart. He's brilliant. So, fourth, and most interesting, I think, and that they shared more information about who I am, I think, were the declarative sentences I shared with the cat. So where you just state a fact. So some, of course, were the cute variety, as in, you are so fluffy, which isn't obvious. I mean, are you the best kitty in the whole wide world, and stuff like that. And I had pages of this. I won't read everything to you. Even the cute sentences, though, are somewhat affirming, sort of like projections of positive affirmations. You're so smart. I love my kitten. Am I really talking to the cat? Am I talking to myself? Probably a little bit of both, I think. I mean, that's my sense and my sort of interest in psychology. Some people say everything we do is really about ourselves, even though we're trying to interact in a world with other people. So other declarative sentences were functional, and yet more what one might say to a human than a cat. Okay, mommy has to get up. It's a full moon. Got to share that with some creature. It's such a nice day. Mommy has to work. And again, it's talking to the cat, but also to me. Finally, there was a subset of somewhat philosophical assertions, spoken sentences that were really more self-directed. My son, of course, reminded me that you can impose research bias on this sort of data collection, as if I didn't know, but he likes to tell me things. So I'll say that I did quit taking notes, as I mentioned, after I became self-conscious. But the examples I share here were candid, and I think they share, a winsome tone that belongs more to my life than to the cat's. So here's the winsome stuff I said to the cat. This is sort of like self-disclosure, isn't it? So I hope you all can beat me at this when you share. Okay, and I say that this is not something I've said just once. I say this to the cat often. You can't always get what you want. And then I'll pause and I'll look at it and I'll say, but sometimes you get what you need. And so that is one of those recurrent things I say to the cat. And so you can really, if you know me, you think, well, she's not just talking to the cat. But then, he does sometimes want to go out when it's not his time. I don't let him out unless I'm going to be there. Here's another one. I'm not a cat. And you probably all said that, because sometimes cats think we're cats. If you've studied cats, they think we're just big cats. And that's why they start grooming you and licking you. I mean, they probably have moments of where they think we're human, but mostly they just think we're big cats. And
you mean we're not?
Yeah, maybe you're right. We are big cats. Yeah, we are. And I should have brought this book. I forgot I have this book called Felicia. It's it's a children's story, and it's about that I read when I was a small child, along with Polly Wiggle, about a tadpole. It's about a cat that turns into a little girl, doesn't like being human, turns back into a cat, and has kittens. Of course, you don't know where the kittens come from because it was, 1950s book, but it's the greatest book. So that's okay. So, and here's another one. This is awful. This is a good show. Mommy has a bad habit of watching too much Netflix, and then tomorrow you can go out. And to me that seems self-reflexive because I would rather be out, tromping in the woods, but I always get to. So, that's okay because we do have to work and cook supper and stuff. Here I have focused on my cat. Now I'll say that I notice when I'm talking to other creatures, I tend to be greeting, exclaiming over some sad state of affairs, as in poor little beetle, or move on, not a good place to live, little spider, which is what I said the other day when the spider, the hood over your stove that sucks up the air, the little spider wanted to live there, not a good place for a spider. And so I use questions when I see creatures in the wild, like what are you doing and stuff. And I do talk to animals in the road, and I'll slow down. I know you're not supposed to, but I break for raccoons, and not to put people with me in peril or anything. Before I conclude, let me see. Oh, I jumped over. I did mention that I tend to coexist in my house with some spiders, the occasional snake, and once a praying mantis. And the snake, I have to do a quick side trip into the snake. So I saw the snake skin last fall. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I guess the snake came in, shed the skin, and went back out again because the fireplace, whatever, live in the country. And I didn't think a thing of it. And then, see, Charles the cat was infirm for a long time after a coyote tried to eat him. So he wasn't looking for snakes. But as soon as I had Gabriel, one night there was Gabriel with this little, little garden snake. It wasn't even a rat snake. It was small, like long, but not big and round and poisonous. And so I got the snake from Gabriel, took it outside, and said goodbye, little snake, and it was alive. I won't tell you, it had a sad ending. But then I was projecting my human, sort of sense on it, because we had a lot of flooding months after that, and then I went out one morning and there was that little snake, because he had a little tiny mark on him so I knew it was him, like heading up the steps. I think he was thinking, this is me projecting. and feeling guilty for putting him outside, where he was more used to being an indoor snake. He didn't do so well outside, and he was probably trying to get back in the house during all that rain. So, but he couldn't have coexisted with Gabriel. He would have accidentally killed him playing with him. So before I conclude, let me return to the Phoebe. Was the Phoebe right? Was I talking to the Phoebe, or was I talking to myself? Was I talking to the universe via the bird, to God? I think I was doing a little bit of everything, and it helps me to think that the Phoebe was right about everything. It's comforting to know. So that's where I'll end, with that Phoebe and the comfort I took from knowing that the Phoebe was right. And I guess since I am kind of talkative, even though I'm a little shy, I had to say that out loud to it. So this is the point where I hope you will share some stuff and or ask questions. I think, a true study would not just have me keeping the journal, but like 1,000 people keeping a diary, what they say to animals, and then people would. But I had a friend overnight, and I was telling her what I was going to do, and so we were comparing what we say to our cats, and there were some commonalities, but we're also very much alike. We've known each other forever and are kindred spirits, so maybe it's not a good comparison, but anyway. But one thing that we do say is you're the best cat in the whole wide world. Any of you do that to your cat? Raise your hand. So every cat is the best cat in the whole wide world, or your dog